She was fired on the spot by her manager, humiliated and thrown out. But just 3 minutes later, she walked back into the office as the new manager. How did this happen? The shocking turn of events will leave you speechless. Before we start, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos. Jasmine sat at her desk, typing away at her computer, unaware of the storm brewing just a few steps away. It had been a regular Tuesday morning, one of those typical office days that seemed to drag on forever. She'd already handled 2 client calls, finished a report for the team, and was preparing for the weekly meeting with her boss, Mr. Thompson. Jasmine had always worked hard, often staying late to ensure everything was perfect, and she was proud of her work. She had the results to back it up. Her numbers were always solid and the clients liked her. But today, something felt off. Mr. Thompson hadn't come by her desk for his usual morning check-in, and he hadn't even sent her his usual emails. Still, she brushed it off. Maybe he was busy. Then, around 10 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was a message from HR asking her to come to Mr. Thompson's office immediately. She was confused. They never needed to meet unless it was something important. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Perhaps a new project was coming her way. Maybe she was finally going to get that promotion she'd been eyeing. With a sigh of relief, she stood up, gathered her things, and walked toward the office. As she walked through the hallway, she didn't know that her life was about to change forever. When she entered Mr. Thompson's office, the look on his face hit her like a cold wave. He was sitting behind his desk, eyes focused on his computer, barely acknowledging her presence. "Jasmine, sit down," he said in a tone that was colder than usual. Jasmine took a seat, trying to ignore the knot that had suddenly formed in her stomach. She smiled politely, waiting for him to speak. He glanced up, but there was no warmth in his gaze. "Jasmine, I've been reviewing your performance, and unfortunately, we've decided to let you go," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. Jasmine's heart dropped. The words didn't make sense at first. "What do you mean? I don't understand. My work has been good, hasn't it?" She was stunned, confused. She had been getting positive feedback from clients and her team. Her numbers were solid, and she'd been working overtime to meet deadlines. But Mr. Thompson didn't seem to care. "It's just not working out," he replied curtly. "We're letting you go, effective immediately." Jasmine's mind raced, but she stayed calm. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, but she had to stay composed. "Is there anything I can do? Maybe just a few more weeks? I can work harder, She was cut off as Mr. Thompson stood up and handed her a severance package. "No, Jasmine. It's final. We've made our decision. Please pack up your things and leave the building." The words stung, and her throat tightened. This wasn't just a layoff. It felt personal. There was something more here, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She knew Mr. Thompson had always been distant, but this felt different. Something wasn't right. Without another word, she stood up, nodded stiffly, and walked out of the office, her mind spinning. It wasn't just the shock of losing her job. It was the way he had spoken to her, the way he dismissed her without even a shred of empathy. Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a professional decision. She had always felt a strange tension with Mr. Thompson, a subtle but undeniable bias that seemed to follow her wherever she went in the office. As Jasmine walked out of Mr. Thompson's office, the weight of the situation hit her. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. Instead, she felt a strange calmness come over her. The shock was starting to wear off, but a deep anger began to grow inside her. The dismissal felt unjust. She knew it, and she wasn't going to just walk away quietly. She could feel the eyes of her co-workers on her as she made her way to her desk. Some of them glanced up quickly, others avoided eye contact, pretending they hadn't noticed. Jasmine couldn't blame them. They were just as much in the dark as she was. Most of them had no idea what had just happened. No one had seen this coming, and it wasn't something she could talk about. The thought of discussing it with anyone in the office seemed pointless. She already knew the truth. No one would care. With her hands shaking, she started packing up her things. Her laptop, a few personal items, and some old coffee cups she'd forgotten to throw away. The office felt strange, almost suffocating now. She was the only one who knew what had just transpired behind closed doors, but there was no one to share it with. It felt like she was in some twisted dream, moving through the motions without control. But as she gathered her things, a quiet determination began to build. This wasn't over. As she walked out the front door of the office building, the fresh air hit her face, but it didn't bring any comfort. Jasmine could feel the sting of the rejection in her chest, and yet, she kept walking. She didn't know where she was headed, but she couldn't stay there any longer. Her head buzzed with questions. Why had Mr. Thompson fired her? Was it because of her race, or was it something else entirely? She reached her car and sat in the driver's seat, staring blankly ahead. The phone buzzed in her bag, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was an email from HR asking her to come back into the office immediately. Jasmine blinked. She read the message twice, convinced she had missed something. Why would they want her to come back? She had just been fired. She stared at the screen for a moment, wondering if this was some kind of mistake. Maybe they had changed their minds, or maybe this was some cruel joke. She felt uneasy, but something inside told her she needed to go back. Jasmine started the car, her hands still trembling slightly. As she pulled back into the parking lot, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her mind raced as she walked toward the building again. She had no idea what was waiting for her inside, but she had a sinking feeling that things were about to take another unexpected turn. As Jasmine stepped through the office doors once more, the fluorescent lights above her seemed almost too bright, and the usual hum of the building felt strangely distant. She walked briskly down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. Her heart beat a little faster with each stride, and the questions in her mind grew louder. Why did HR want her back? What did they want to say after firing her just minutes ago? She arrived at the same floor, but this time, instead of walking toward the back offices, she was directed to the HR department. When she knocked and entered, the HR manager, Carla, was waiting for her. She didn't look surprised to see Jasmine. If anything, she seemed prepared. "Jasmine, thank you for coming back so quickly," Carla said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "Please have a seat." Jasmine sat down slowly, feeling her unease grow. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why did you call me back? You just fired me." Carla nodded, her expression neutral. "Yes, Jasmine, I know this is confusing, but we've just received new instructions from the board." She paused for a moment, as if trying to gauge Jasmine's reaction. "Effective immediately. You've been promoted to the position of department manager." Jasmine stared at her, blinking rapidly, trying to process the words. "What? You're kidding, right?" Her voice faltered, and she shook her head in disbelief. "But Mr. Thompson he just fired me. How can this be real? What is happening?" Carla leaned forward slightly, looking serious. "Jasmine, I understand this is a lot to take in. The truth is, there were concerns about Mr. Thompson's leadership, and after an internal review, the board decided to make changes. They're removing him from the position of department manager, effective immediately. And well, they've chosen you as his replacement." Jasmine felt her stomach flip. The room spun a little, and she had to steady herself in the chair. She tried to speak, but her mind was racing too fast to form a clear thought. "But why me? Why would they choose me? I've been here a long time, but I wasn't expecting this. Why not someone else?" Carla gave her a sympathetic look, but there was something calculated in her eyes. "Jasmine, you've shown leadership, initiative, and your work ethic speaks for itself. The board believes you're the right fit for this role. As for Mr. Thompson," she paused again, as if carefully considering her words. "His actions over the past few months have raised some serious concerns, and the decision was made to part ways with him. You're the new manager now, effective immediately." The room felt suffocating as Jasmine absorbed the news. A whirlwind of emotions rushed through her: shock, confusion, disbelief, and surprisingly a sense of power she hadn't expected. She had been fired just moments ago, but now she was being handed the keys to the very position she'd once only dreamed about. The irony was almost too much to take in. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You're serious?" Jasmine finally managed to say, her voice cracking slightly. "This isn't some kind of joke?" Carla nodded. "I know this is overwhelming, Jasmine, but the decision is final. Your new position comes with full responsibility for managing the department. And as of now, Mr. Thompson is no longer your boss. You will be overseeing the team starting this afternoon." Jasmine felt the blood rush to her head. She was stunned, yet something deep inside her began to shift. This wasn't just an unexpected turn. It was a chance. She had been dismissed without reason, and now, in the blink of an eye, she was the one in charge. The tables had turned, but she knew she had to be careful. No one had expected this. Not her co-workers, not Mr. Thompson, and certainly not the people in HR. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jasmine smiled. Jasmine's head was still spinning as she walked out of the HR office, clutching the new contract that now made her the department's manager. The hallway felt different this time. It wasn't the same walk she had made just an hour ago. Head down, stunned by the harsh words of Mr. Thompson. Now she felt an unfamiliar sense of control, a power she hadn't anticipated. But as she moved toward the department, she knew it wouldn't be easy. She had just been handed an impossible situation. Her former co-workers, those who had worked under Mr. Thompson, had no idea what had just happened. She'd gone from being fired to becoming the boss in a matter of minutes, and that kind of shift wasn't something you could explain with a simple conversation. They would be shocked, confused, and maybe even resentful. She didn't expect an easy transition. She pushed open the door to the department where her old desk stood at the back of the room. The team was scattered about, working on their computers, typing away on keyboards, lost in their tasks. But the moment they saw her standing there, a few heads turned. Whispers began to circulate. They had no idea what had just gone down, but they all recognized her. "Jasmine?" Sarah, one of her colleagues, looked up, her face filled with confusion. "What are you doing here? I thought you were leaving?" Jasmine took a breath, adjusting to her new reality. "Actually," she said, her voice steady, "I'm not leaving. I've just been promoted to department manager." The words felt strange as they left her mouth, but she said them with certainty. No hesitation, no doubt. It was now her role, and she wasn't going to act like it was a mistake. The room fell silent. Sarah blinked, her face going from confusion to disbelief. "You? But Mr. Thompson just fired you, right?" Her voice trailed off as she glanced around the room, waiting for someone to confirm that this wasn't some bizarre misunderstanding. Jasmine could see the others slowly looking up from their work, their curiosity piqued. Some of them looked at her with raised eyebrows, others with open skepticism. Jasmine could feel the tension in the room. She could practically hear the gears turning in their heads. How could she go from being fired to being promoted? How could she be in charge now? "I know it sounds strange," Jasmine continued, walking to her new desk, now the manager's desk, at the front of the room. "But things change fast around here. Mr. Thompson is no longer with the company. The board has made some decisions, and I'm the one who will be leading this department now." There was an awkward pause. No one spoke for a moment, but the shift in the room was undeniable. People exchanged looks, clearly unsure of how to process what they were hearing. Some were visibly uncomfortable, while others tried to mask their confusion with forced smiles. Jasmine knew they didn't trust her yet. They didn't understand how she, a colleague they had worked alongside, could now be their boss. She didn't expect them to. This was too quick, too strange. But there was one thing she did know. She had the power now. She wasn't just the person who had been fired and humiliated. She was now the one who could make the decisions, the one who could shape the department's future. And if anyone was going to have a hard time adjusting to that, it would be Mr. Thompson. Her fingers brushed over the desk, feeling the smooth surface. It was now hers. Her name would be on the door, not his. "All right," she said, breaking the silence and sitting down in her new chair. "Let's get to work. I know we have a lot to figure out, and I'm ready to do what it takes to make sure this department succeeds. We all have a lot of catching up to do, so let's start fresh." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each person in turn. There was no more uncertainty in her gaze. Jasmine was in control now. The first few minutes felt like a blur. Jasmine sat behind her new desk, adjusting to the weight of her new title. Her colleagues still seemed unsure of how to respond. They looked at her like she was a stranger, unsure of whether to treat her like the same co-worker they'd seen just a few hours ago, or the new manager who had somehow risen from the ashes of a sudden dismissal. She wasn't surprised by the silence. What did surprise her, though, was the way the atmosphere in the room had shifted. There was a certain tension now, almost a feeling of uncertainty hanging in the air. Jasmine knew that it wasn't just her who was adjusting. The entire department had just been thrown into an awkward, uncomfortable position. To break the silence, Jasmine decided to address the elephant in the room. "I know this is unusual," she started, her voice calm but firm. "And I know some of you are probably wondering how all this happened. Believe me, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it too. But the one thing I do know is that we have a job to do, and I'm here to make sure we get it done right. I want to move forward, not backward. So, let's focus on the work." There was a long pause before anyone spoke up. Sarah, who had been one of the first to react, was the first to break the silence again. "But, Jasmine, how can we trust you now? I mean, one minute you're fired and the next minute you're the manager. That's hard to wrap our heads around. It just doesn't feel right." Jasmine nodded. She understood Sarah's hesitation. This situation wasn't normal, and she wasn't expecting everyone to fall in line without question. "I get it, Sarah. This is all a bit strange. Believe me, I'm just as surprised as you are. But trust isn't something I expect from you right away. I'm going to earn it just like I've always earned my place here. All I'm asking for right now is the same respect I've always given to each of you." The room was still quiet, but Jasmine could feel the slight shift. She wasn't demanding trust. She wasn't trying to force anyone to accept her. She was just being real with them, offering them a chance to come to terms with this strange reality on their own time. "But we need to talk about what happens next," Jasmine continued, trying to steer the conversation back to business. "We have deadlines to meet, clients to serve, and projects to finish. I'm not here to change everything overnight, but I want to make sure we're working together as a team. If there's anything that needs to be addressed, now is the time." One of the quieter members of the team, Tom, finally spoke up. "So, what now? What changes are we expecting? I mean, it's been a little chaotic lately with Mr. Thompson's leadership and all. Is there a new direction? Are we going to be treated differently now?" Jasmine took a deep breath. Tom was right. There had been a lot of confusion under Mr. Thompson's leadership, especially with his unpredictable behavior and his tendency to take credit for others' work. But she wasn't here to stir the pot or cause division. Her goal was to move forward, and she had to keep that vision clear in her mind. "Look," Jasmine said, "I don't want to sugarcoat anything. Yes, things have been a mess, and I'm sure many of you felt ignored or overlooked. But that's going to change. I'm not here to blame anyone, but we can all do better. I'm not asking for blind loyalty, but I am asking for your commitment to the job. If we can all pull together, we'll not only get through this, we'll succeed." She paused, letting her words sink in. She could feel the room shift just slightly, but it was enough. Jasmine had to walk a fine line. She couldn't be too harsh or too lenient. She wasn't there to be their friend. She was there to lead, and for the first time she could sense that they were starting to realize it. "Now let's take a moment to discuss our priorities for the next few weeks," Jasmine continued, feeling a surge of confidence. "We've got some important projects on the horizon, and I need everyone to be on their game. I want us to be more communicative, more efficient, and more supportive of one another. No more surprises. If something's wrong, we talk about it. No more behind-the-scenes games." There was a soft murmur of agreement from the team. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was a start. Jasmine had to remind herself that this wasn't going to happen overnight. She had just gone from the fired employee to the new manager, and that alone was going to take some getting used to for everyone, including herself. Still, as she looked around the room at her team, she knew that this was her moment. She was in control now, and no matter what, she was going to make sure she didn't waste this second chance. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, emails, and a dozen small decisions that, in the grand scheme of things, didn't seem too significant. But to Jasmine, each moment felt like a test. She had walked into the office as the newly appointed manager, but she knew she had to prove herself to the team. The hard part wasn't just making decisions. It was showing the department that she was the one who could lead them through the uncertainty, especially after everything that had just happened with Mr. Thompson. By the time the afternoon rolled around, Jasmine had already faced her first challenge. A tense conversation with one of the senior team members, Rachel. Rachel had always been Mr. Thompson's right-hand person, and Jasmine could tell that she wasn't thrilled about the change. She had been quiet during the meeting earlier, but Jasmine noticed her side-eye glances and the tension in her shoulders. After the meeting, Rachel pulled her aside in the hallway. "I don't know what's going on here," Rachel began, her voice low but firm. "But I'm just going to say it. Mr. Thompson was in charge for years, and suddenly, you're here. Just like that. I don't know if I can trust that." Jasmine took a deep breath. She had expected this kind of pushback. Rachel wasn't the first person to question her authority, and she definitely wouldn't be the last. But Jasmine wasn't backing down. She couldn't afford to. "I understand how you feel, Rachel," Jasmine said, keeping her tone steady. "This is a lot for all of us. I'm not expecting anyone to blindly follow me, and I'm not asking you to just forget what happened. But the truth is, I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. If you have concerns, let's talk about them. But I expect you to do your part and work with me, just like we always have." Rachel was quiet for a moment, clearly processing what Jasmine had said. Finally, she gave a short nod, though Jasmine could tell she wasn't fully convinced yet. But that was okay. Trust wouldn't come overnight, and Jasmine knew she had to be patient. The rest of the day passed with more conversations, some easy, some a little more challenging. Jasmine handled each one with as much grace as she could muster. She could feel the eyes of her co-workers on her every time she made a decision or spoke up in a meeting. She didn't blame them for being skeptical. They had just witnessed a complete upheaval, and the power dynamic had shifted dramatically in a very short time. But Jasmine had a plan, and she was sticking to it. By the time the workday came to a close, Jasmine was exhausted. Her mind was racing, still processing the whirlwind of emotions and decisions she'd had to make. As she sat at her new desk, reviewing the final emails and checking her calendar for the next day, she felt a flicker of something else, a sense of resolve. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. She had been handed a second chance, one that most people didn't get. And even though she had no idea what tomorrow would bring, she knew one thing for sure. She was going to make it count. As she gathered her things and turned off the lights in her office, she took one last look at the empty hallway. Tomorrow would be another day, and it would be a fresh start for her and her team. She was no longer the employee who had been fired. She was the leader, and whatever came next, she was ready. The next morning, Jasmine walked into the office feeling a mix of determination and nerves. She hadn't slept much the night before, her mind still spinning from everything that had happened. The weight of her new role sat heavy on her shoulders, but it also fueled her resolve. She had to prove herself, not just to her team, but to herself too. She was ready. The first thing on her agenda was to meet with the team for a strategy session. The department had several ongoing projects, and she needed to get a sense of where everyone stood. She couldn't afford to waste time. As she walked into the conference room, she noticed that the atmosphere was different. The team was already seated, but there was a palpable shift in the air. Some people had returned to work with a more relaxed attitude, while others seemed more tense, still adjusting to the new dynamic. "Good morning, everyone," Jasmine greeted them, her voice steady but firm. She had learned already that if she didn't lead with confidence, she would lose them. I know things have been a bit chaotic around here lately, but it's a new day and I want to get us back on track. Let's talk about where we stand with each of our projects. The team was a bit quieter than usual, but they were listening. Jasmine went around the room, asking for updates on each project. People gave their reports, some more confident than others. Sarah, who had seemed the most skeptical of her promotion, spoke up next. We're ahead on the Miller project, but we're running into some delays with the Benson account. We need more support from the design team to stay on track. Jasmine nodded, making notes on her tablet. Okay, let's prioritize that. Sarah, I want you to draft a list of what you need, and I'll make sure you get the resources you need from design. It wasn't a huge decision, but it was the kind of action that showed her team she was capable of handling the small things too. They needed to see that she was organized and proactive, not just reactive to the chaos. After that, the meeting went smoothly. Jasmine had a clear plan for each project, and she made sure everyone knew what their priorities were. As the meeting wrapped up, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had kept the team focused and moving forward, which was exactly what they needed. But just as she was about to leave the room, Rachel, the senior team member who had given her pushback yesterday, pulled her aside. Jasmine, Rachel began, her voice lower than usual. I want to apologize. I was out of line yesterday. I didn't think you could do this, but I see now that you're not just here by luck. You've got a plan, and you're handling things. I'm sorry I doubted you. Jasmine could feel the tension in her chest begin to ease. Rachel wasn't one to apologize easily, and hearing those words meant something. Thanks, Rachel, Jasmine replied, offering a small but sincere smile. I know this isn't easy, and I'm not expecting you to trust me right away, but I'm here to work with you, and I'll do everything I can to make sure this team succeeds. Rachel nodded, her posture loosening a bit. We're all in this together, right? She said, her tone now more collaborative than before. Exactly, Jasmine agreed, feeling a small but significant shift in their dynamic. We're a team, and we all need to pull in the same direction if we want to get things done. As Rachel walked away, Jasmine took a deep breath. That was one battle won. Slowly but surely, the team was coming around. There was still work to be done, but she could feel the tide turning. The rest of the day was filled with more meetings, more updates, and more decisions. Each one, no matter how small, reinforced her confidence. By the end of the day, Jasmine felt like she had gained some ground, but there was still so much left to do. She knew that this was just the beginning, that her work was far from over. As she sat at her desk, reviewing emails and preparing for the next day, a sense of pride washed over her. The day had gone better than she expected, but even more than that, Jasmine had made a difference. She wasn't just managing projects or checking boxes. She was reshaping the department, gaining trust, and earning her place as a leader. Tomorrow she would take another step forward, and slowly, surely she would prove to herself and to everyone else that she deserved to be there. The following days blurred into each other, each one marked by new challenges and small victories. Jasmine didn't have the luxury of easing into her role. The transition was messy, the team still adjusting, and the ripple effects of Mr. Thompson's departure were felt at every level. But Jasmine had a singular focus now. She had to make sure the department didn't just survive, but thrived. It didn't take long for her to realize how much work was still left to do. Despite her efforts to move the team forward, there were still lingering tensions, especially with a few of the senior members. Rachel was on board, but a couple of others were still holding back, unsure if Jasmine was the right choice for the job. They were waiting for her to slip up, to make a mistake that would confirm their doubts. The hardest part was dealing with the lingering effects of Mr. Thompson's leadership. He had been a poor manager in many ways, but he had also set a certain tone in the office. There had been a lack of communication, too many projects left unfinished, and too many promises left broken. Jasmine couldn't just sweep all of that under the rug. She had to address it directly. One afternoon, She called a team-wide meeting to discuss the biggest issues they were facing. As the team filed into the conference room, Jasmine noticed the usual mixture of skepticism and curiosity in their eyes. They weren't sure what to expect, but Jasmine had a clear agenda, and she wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. "All right, let's get started," Jasmine said, standing at the head of the table. Her voice was calm but firm, the tone of a leader who knew exactly what needed to be said. "I know that there have been a lot of problems in this department recently. Some of you feel overlooked, others feel like things aren't being communicated properly. I get that. But we're not going to fix anything by pretending that everything is fine. We have to face these issues head on." There was a moment of silence as her words settled in. Some of the team members shifted in their seats, exchanging glances. They were used to avoiding confrontation, to brushing problems under the rug until they couldn't be ignored any longer. But Jasmine wasn't going to let them off the hook. She had to make it clear that this department wasn't going to move forward until they all worked together to resolve the issues at hand. "I'm not going to lie to you," she continued. "We have problems, but I'm here to fix them, and I need your help. If we're going to make this work, we all need to communicate better, collaborate more effectively, and hold ourselves accountable. We can't keep working in silos, and we can't keep avoiding tough conversations. If something isn't working, we need to talk about it, even if it's uncomfortable." Her words hung in the air for a moment, and Jasmine could see the wheels turning in her team's heads. This was the conversation they needed to have, but it wasn't going to be easy. She knew it would take time for them to fully trust her, especially after the way things had been handled in the past. But they couldn't keep going the way they had been. Something had to change. "I know this is a lot to take in," Jasmine said, softening her tone just a bit. "But I believe in this team. I believe we can turn this around. We have the talent, the drive, and the potential to do something great here. But it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take time." After a brief silence, Sarah spoke up, her voice hesitant but sincere. "You're right, Jasmine. We've been running in circles for too long. If we keep doing things the way we've always done them, we're not going to get anywhere. I think we're all ready for a change." Jasmine nodded, grateful for the support. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Thank you, Sarah," she said. "That's exactly what I needed to hear, and I'm here for all of you. If you have concerns, if you feel like something's not working, you can always come to me. We'll figure it out together." There was a shift in the room after that, subtle but real. It wasn't immediate trust, but it was the beginning of a conversation, the start of something that could grow into something bigger. As the meeting wrapped up, Jasmine felt a small sense of relief. They hadn't solved everything, but at least they had acknowledged the issues. And that was the first step. As the team filed out of the room, Jasmine sat back in her chair for a moment, taking a deep breath. It was going to be a long road ahead, and she wasn't naive enough to think that all the problems would disappear overnight. But she knew one thing for sure. She was ready to do the work. No matter what came next, she was committed to turning this department around, one step at a time. The following week, Jasmine took her first real step toward transforming the department. It wasn't a grand gesture or an overnight fix, but it was something that had been missing for far too long: organization and communication. She started by setting up a weekly team check-in, where everyone would have the chance to speak up, raise concerns, and share progress updates. She also implemented a new project management tool to keep everyone on the same page. It was basic stuff, but the team had never had consistent systems in place before, and Jasmine knew that without structure, nothing would change. At first, it felt like a small victory. People were skeptical, but they showed up. They took part, even if reluctantly at first. What Jasmine didn't expect was the pushback she'd receive from a few of the senior team members who were still loyal to Mr. Thompson. They had been used to operating in chaos, doing their own thing without accountability or direction. For them, Jasmine's attempt to create structure felt foreign, even unnecessary. One afternoon, Tom, one of the more senior members of the team, stopped by her office. He had been quiet during the check-ins, often offering only minimal input. But today he seemed ready to speak his mind. "Jasmine," he said, his tone a bit defensive, "I get that you're trying to bring in these new systems, but honestly, this is a lot of extra work for no real reason. We've been doing fine without all these meetings and tracking tools. I don't think we need them. We're getting our work done, right?" Jasmine leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. She knew this conversation was coming. She had expected resistance, especially from the older, more established members of the team who were used to the old way of doing things. "Tom," she began, keeping her voice even, "I understand where you're coming from. But the truth is, the old way wasn't working. We were missing deadlines, dropping the ball on projects, and nobody seemed to be on the same page. This isn't about making more work for everyone. It's about making sure we're all moving in the same direction. It's about accountability, so that when things go wrong, we know exactly what happened and where to fix it." Tom's face softened slightly, though he was still visibly uncomfortable with the changes. "I'm not saying you're wrong," he muttered. "I just don't see why we need all this new stuff. It feels like we're being micromanaged." Jasmine shook her head. "I'm not micromanaging, Tom. I'm making sure we have the tools and processes to succeed. If we can't communicate effectively or stay on top of things, we'll keep falling into the same problems we've had for years. That's why we need these systems in place." She paused for a moment, watching his reaction. He was still processing, but there was something in his eyes now, a hint of understanding, if not agreement. "I'm not here to make your job harder," Jasmine said, her voice softening. "I'm here to help all of us succeed. But if we're going to do that, we need structure. We need to work together as a team, not as a bunch of individuals doing our own thing. I know it's a shift, but it's one that'll pay off." Tom stood there for a moment, clearly wrestling with her words. Finally, he gave a short nod. "I'll give it a shot. But I'm still not sure about all of this." "That's all I'm asking for," Jasmine replied. "Just give it a shot. If it doesn't work, we'll figure it out together. But we won't know until we try." After Tom left her office, Jasmine let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She knew it wasn't the end of the conversation, but it was progress. It was the first time one of her more resistant colleagues had started to come around. And that meant something. She wasn't trying to change the department overnight, but every little step forward counted. That evening, as she sat at her desk, reviewing emails and drafting a few more notes for the next team meeting, Jasmine realized how much had already shifted in the short time she had been in charge. The tension was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but it wasn't as thick as it had been when she first started. People were talking more, they were starting to trust her, and even if it was small, it was enough. Tomorrow she would take another step forward. There was still so much to do. So many broken systems to fix, so many relationships to rebuild. But Jasmine knew that every day was another opportunity to prove herself, to show her team that they could do better, that they could trust her, and that together they could accomplish something great. And that, she knew, was just the beginning. A few days later, Jasmine found herself sitting in a meeting with Carla from HR, reviewing the department's performance metrics. While the team was still adjusting to the new systems, Jasmine could already see the changes in their day-to-day work. Projects were being completed on time, the communication had improved, and most importantly, there was a noticeable shift in morale. People were starting to take ownership of their work, and that was exactly what Jasmine had hoped for. As Carla flipped through the reports, she raised an eyebrow. "I have to say, Jasmine, I'm impressed with what I'm seeing here. The team's output has increased, and it looks like they're adapting to the changes you've made. Honestly, I didn't expect such a quick turnaround." Jasmine nodded, her mind still processing the week's progress. It hadn't been easy, but the results were starting to show. "Thank you, Carla. I can't take all the credit. The team has really stepped up. It's not perfect yet, but we're moving in the right direction." Carla smiled. "You know, when the board first suggested you for this position, there were some doubts. People weren't sure if you had the experience or the temperament to take charge of this department, especially after what happened with Mr. Thompson. But I have to say, you've proved them wrong. You've handled everything with a lot of grace. Jasmine shifted in her seat, a little uncomfortable with the praise. She hadn't really thought about the doubts others had about her. To her, this wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about doing the right thing for the team. Still, hearing Carla's words felt like a small validation of everything she'd been working toward. She was starting to feel like she belonged in this role, not just because she was the new manager, but because she was earning the respect of the team. "I'm just doing my best," Jasmine replied modestly. "It's been a learning curve for sure, but I'm committed to making this work. We've got a lot of potential here, and I want to help everyone reach it." Carla nodded. "Well, it's working. I've had some positive feedback from the team as well. They seem to be more engaged, more motivated. The way you're communicating with them, keeping things clear and transparent, is definitely making a difference. I think the department's future is looking brighter under your leadership." Jasmine appreciated the compliment, but she wasn't ready to celebrate just yet. She knew how quickly things could shift back to where they were before, especially if they didn't stay consistent. "It's just the beginning. There's still a lot to do. I want to make sure we keep this momentum going." Carla agreed. "Of course. But I think you've already established a solid foundation. The real test will be keeping this up in the long term. That's when the true leadership shows." Jasmine leaned back in her chair, her mind turning over Carla's words. She understood what Carla meant. Right now, things were looking good. But in the corporate world, nothing was ever guaranteed. The team could easily slip back into old habits, and Jasmine could easily lose their trust if she wasn't careful. The conversation shifted to more practical matters: budgeting, resource allocation, and a few personnel issues. But Jasmine's mind kept drifting back to the bigger picture. She had made progress, but it wasn't enough to just make things better for a short time. She needed to make this change permanent. As the meeting wrapped up and Carla left the office, Jasmine felt the weight of her responsibilities settle back onto her shoulders. The department was moving in the right direction, but the hardest part was yet to come. She had to continue to prove herself, not just as a manager, but as someone who could lead with integrity, inspire her team, and keep them engaged even when things got tough. She knew it wouldn't always be smooth sailing. There would be setbacks. There would be moments when the team would question her decisions, when she would question herself. But Jasmine was ready for it. She had fought too hard to get here, and she wasn't about to let go of this opportunity now. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "Meeting after work? I want to talk about the next project. Got some ideas we should go over." Jasmine smiled. Rachel had been one of the most resistant to change, but lately she had been one of the most engaged. Her willingness to reach out for a meeting felt like another small victory in the making. Jasmine quickly typed back, "Sounds good. Let's do it." She set her phone down and looked out the window. There was a lot of work ahead, but she was ready. One day at a time, she would keep building this team, pushing them to be better, and proving to everyone, including herself, that she deserved this role. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and countless decisions that tested Jasmine's leadership in ways she hadn't expected. Despite the small wins she'd seen, the challenges were relentless. There were days when things seemed to be falling into place, and then there were days when it felt like one misstep could undo everything she'd worked for. But Jasmine kept moving forward, determined to make the department function as a cohesive unit. One of the most challenging aspects of her new role was managing the different personalities on the team. While some were embracing the changes and pushing themselves harder, others were still hesitant, holding back just enough to test her patience. But she understood. Change was hard for everyone, especially when it came so suddenly. Rachel, for example, had slowly become one of Jasmine's strongest allies. Over the past couple of weeks, she had started taking on more responsibility, offering up ideas during meetings, and speaking out more confidently. It wasn't a 180-degree shift, but it was enough to make a difference. Rachel was starting to trust Jasmine's leadership, and that meant a lot. Jasmine had a sense that Rachel had finally bought into the idea that they were working toward something bigger, something that would benefit everyone in the long run. Still, there were moments when the strain of leadership weighed heavily on Jasmine. She'd had to put out several fires over the last few days, issues with timelines, miscommunications, and the occasional tense conversation with a senior team member who wasn't adjusting as quickly as the others. There were even moments when Jasmine questioned if she was making the right choices, but she knew she couldn't afford to show doubt. Her team needed her to be strong, steady, and confident, even when she didn't always feel that way. One particular afternoon, Jasmine received an email that made her stomach tighten. It was from HR, requesting a one-on-one meeting to discuss some team dynamics that had been raised in a recent feedback survey. The words feedback and dynamics weren't exactly reassuring. She didn't know whether to be nervous or to brace herself for another difficult conversation, but whatever it was, she knew she had to face it head on. That evening she met with Carla, the HR manager, in her office. Carla sat down with a clipboard, the same serious expression Jasmine had seen a few times before. "Jasmine," Carla began, flipping through her notes, "I wanted to talk to you about some concerns that have come up from the team. It's not uncommon for there to be a bit of pushback when a new manager takes over, but I think you need to know what some of your team members have been saying." Jasmine felt her heart rate pick up. She had always prided herself on being approachable, but feedback like this was never easy to hear. "What kind of concerns?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. "Mainly about communication," Carla said, setting the clipboard down. "Some of the team feels that, while you've made improvements in some areas, they're still not clear on where they stand in the bigger picture. They're asking for more transparency about goals and expectations. Few of them mentioned that they're not sure what direction you want the team to go in, or if they're meeting the expectations you've set." Jasmine's mind raced. She had thought she was being clear, that she was leading with transparency. But maybe it wasn't enough. She hadn't realized how much uncertainty still lingered, especially with those who were still adjusting to her leadership style. She could see how important it was to keep her team on the same page and ensure that they understood where they were heading. "I didn't realize it was that bad," Jasmine said quietly, more to herself than to Carla. "I've been trying to be as open as possible. I have weekly check-ins, we've got project management tools, and I try to communicate any changes or decisions. But clearly, it's not getting through the way I thought it was." Carla nodded, looking sympathetic but firm. "It's not about the tools, Jasmine. It's about the clarity of the message. Some of the team members are feeling disconnected, like they don't know exactly how their work fits into the larger goals of the department. They want more guidance, more direction from you. This isn't a criticism of you personally. It's about making sure that you're giving them what they need to succeed." Jasmine took a deep breath, letting Carla's words sink in. This wasn't the first time she'd heard feedback about communication, but it was the first time it had been this direct. She had to make changes. She couldn't just assume that her team understood everything the way she did. She needed to be clearer, more transparent, and most importantly, more consistent with her expectations. "Thank you for telling me this, Carla," Jasmine said, standing up. "I'll work on it. I'll make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of where we're headed, and I'll make sure the goals are communicated better. I want everyone to feel like they're a part of this, like their work matters." Carla smiled, standing as well. "I know you're doing your best, Jasmine. You've come a long way in a short amount of time. Just remember that leadership is a process. You're going to make mistakes, but what matters is how you learn from them, and you're learning, which is what counts." Jasmine nodded, feeling both reassured and determined. The feedback wasn't easy to hear, but it was valuable. She knew that if she could address these concerns quickly, her team would trust her even more. There was still a long road ahead, but Jasmine had learned a crucial lesson. Leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about listening, adjusting, and growing along with the team. As she left the meeting, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had the tools, the plan, and the drive to make this work. And now, more than ever, she was ready to take her leadership to the next level. The next few days were a blur of strategy meetings and follow-ups. Jasmine knew she had to address the concerns raised in her meeting with Carla. The feedback had stung, but she was determined not to let it throw her off track. She'd always believed in the power of communication, but now she realized she needed to be even more intentional about it. To start, she decided to be more explicit about the department's goals and where each team member's role fit into the bigger picture. Jasmine worked late into the night, preparing a clear, concise presentation for the next all-team meeting. She didn't want her team to feel uncertain again. They needed to know exactly what was expected of them and how their work would contribute to the department's success. The following morning, Jasmine called the team together. She had already noticed that the tension from a few weeks ago had started to ease. People were more open, more engaged, but she knew there was still room to improve. She had to make sure the team felt not only included, but also empowered. "All right, everyone," she began, standing at the front of the room. "We've been making good progress, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I've heard your feedback, and I realize that I need to do a better job of communicating the bigger picture and making sure you all know exactly what we're working toward." The team sat up a little straighter, their eyes focused on her. There was a quiet, attentive energy in the room. No one was distracted or disinterested. Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm despite the pressure. She was ready. "I've put together a roadmap for the next 6 months," she continued, pulling up the presentation on the screen behind her. "This is where we're headed, and this is how each of you plays a crucial role in getting us there. We've got 3 key objectives: improving our client satisfaction, streamlining our project workflows, and expanding our outreach to new clients. These are the areas we'll focus on, and I want each of you to know exactly how your work fits into that." As she walked through the roadmap, she could see the team starting to nod, their faces slowly shifting from uncertain to focused. For the first time in weeks, Jasmine felt like she was reaching them, really reaching them. She wasn't just telling them what needed to be done. She was showing them why it mattered. "I know there have been some bumps along the way, and I know the transition hasn't been easy," Jasmine added. "But we're in this together. Every project, every task we complete has a direct impact on these goals. And when we hit those goals, we all succeed. This isn't about me, it's about us, about what we can do as a team." The energy in the room shifted again, but this time it wasn't just curiosity. It was a sense of shared purpose. Jasmine could feel it. The room was with her. She had their attention. The ideas she was presenting weren't just abstract concepts anymore. They were tangible, and the team could see how their individual contributions would help bring the department closer to those targets. After walking them through the specific objectives and timelines, Jasmine opened the floor for questions. A few of the team members, Sarah, Tom, and even Rachel, asked thoughtful questions, and Jasmine answered each one with clear, concrete responses. The discussion was productive, and there was a sense of collaboration that hadn't been there before. Everyone seemed invested, willing to contribute their thoughts and ideas. For the first time since she had taken over, Jasmine felt like the team wasn't just following her, they were working alongside her. When the meeting ended, the team lingered for a few moments, chatting amongst themselves. Jasmine stood at the front, watching them with a sense of pride. It was far from perfect. There were still kinks to work out, still hurdles to jump, but it was progress. And that progress, however small, meant everything. Later that afternoon, as Jasmine sat at her desk catching up on emails, she received a message from Rachel. "Can we talk about the new client proposal later? I have a few ideas I want to go over." Jasmine smiled, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Rachel had been one of the most skeptical of the changes at first, but now she was taking initiative. That was exactly what Jasmine needed. Team members who were willing to step up, take ownership, and bring their ideas to the table. "Sure, let's meet after lunch. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts," As she closed her inbox, Jasmine felt a sense of relief. Things were starting to click, and while there was still a lot to do, this felt like a turning point. She had the trust of her team now, most of them at least, and that was a huge milestone. She knew that if she could keep them engaged, keep them focused on the goals they'd just outlined, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish together. The work ahead was going to be demanding, but Jasmine felt more prepared than ever. She was ready to lead them through whatever challenges came next. She was no longer just the manager who had taken over from someone else. She was Jasmine, the leader who was shaping the future of this department. And for the first time, she truly believed she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the weeks passed, the momentum Jasmine had built continued to grow. The department was becoming more cohesive, more focused. There were still moments of resistance, small setbacks that tested her resolve. But Jasmine was learning to handle them with a calm that she hadn't known she possessed before. The feedback from the team was improving too. It wasn't perfect, but it was clear that they were starting to feel more confident in her leadership. The weekly team check-ins had become a staple, and Jasmine noticed that her team members were starting to speak up more during those meetings. They were sharing ideas, offering solutions to problems, and even taking the initiative to solve issues before they reached her desk. It was a relief to see them stepping up, showing the kind of ownership and teamwork that had been missing before. One of the biggest victories for Jasmine came during the team's review of the latest client proposal. A few months ago, the idea of her team working together on something so important would have been a chaotic, disjointed effort. But now, the proposal had come together seamlessly, with each person taking responsibility for their part of the project and ensuring everything was aligned. That afternoon, as Jasmine was reviewing the final draft of the proposal with Rachel and Sarah, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They were in a much stronger place than they had been at the start of her tenure. "Jasmine," Rachel said, looking up from the proposal, "I've got to admit, I was skeptical at first, but I can't deny it anymore. Things are really changing around here. The work we're doing, the way we're collaborating, it feels different. It feels like we're actually moving forward." Jasmine smiled, feeling the weight of Rachel's words. "I'm glad to hear you say that. But this is all you guys. You've really stepped up. We're all in this together, and I'm just here to keep us all moving in the right direction." Sarah nodded in agreement. "I've noticed the difference too. The communication is so much better now. It's like we're not working in the dark anymore." Jasmine leaned back in her chair, feeling the shift in the room. It wasn't just the work that was changing. It was the atmosphere. The tension that had once defined the department had slowly faded away, replaced by a sense of collaboration and mutual respect. "We still have work to do," Jasmine said, "but we're on the right track. We've got a strong proposal here, and I think this client is going to be impressed." As the meeting wrapped up, Jasmine felt the familiar buzz of satisfaction that came with a job well done. It wasn't just about the proposal. It was about how far the team had come. They were no longer just colleagues working in isolation. They were a unified team with a common goal. Later that evening, as Jasmine sat in her office reviewing emails, a new thought started to take shape in her mind. She had been so focused on improving the day-to-day operations, on building trust and communication, that she hadn't really thought about what came next. She'd been so wrapped up in managing the present that she hadn't looked ahead to the future. She knew she had to start thinking bigger. The department had made incredible strides, but now it was time to think about how they could push themselves even further. Jasmine wasn't content to let the department plateau. She had a vision for growth, not just for herself, but for her entire team. The next day, she scheduled a meeting with Carla from HR. It was time to talk about the next steps, about long-term goals and what the future could look like for the department. She needed to know how they could keep pushing forward, how they could expand their capabilities and tackle even more ambitious projects. Jasmine had a gut feeling that the department was on the cusp of something even bigger, but she needed guidance on how to get them there. When Carla walked into her office later that morning, Jasmine wasted no time getting to the point. "I think we're ready for the next step," she said, her voice steady and determined. "The team's come a long way, and I believe we can take on bigger projects. But I want to know what we need to do to continue growing. I'm thinking about the long-term strategy for the department. We've built a solid foundation, but I want to make sure we don't lose sight of the bigger picture." Carla listened carefully, nodding as Jasmine spoke. "I'm glad to hear you say that. Honestly, I've been thinking about the same thing. You've done a great job getting the department on track, but the real question is, where do you see this department going in the next year? 2 years? What's your vision for growth?" Jasmine paused, thinking carefully before responding. "I see a department that isn't just reacting to problems, but actively seeking new opportunities. I want us to be leaders in our field, not just by completing tasks well, but by pushing the boundaries of what we can do. I think we can take on more complex projects, expand our reach to new clients, and improve our workflows even further." Carla smiled, clearly impressed. "I like where you're going with this, Jasmine, and I think the team is ready for it. The next step is to start building out a long-term strategy that aligns with your vision. We'll need to look at resource allocation, potential new hires, and how we can set measurable goals that push the team to the next level." Jasmine nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. The conversation with Carla was exactly what she needed. It was the push she had been looking for. She had built the foundation, but now it was time to think bigger, to start laying the groundwork for the future of the department. As the meeting ended, Jasmine felt a surge of excitement. This was it, the next chapter. She wasn't just managing a department anymore, she was leading it into a new era, and the possibilities were endless. The following weeks were filled with brainstorming sessions, long strategy meetings, and a flurry of decisions that would set the course for the department's future. Jasmine was no longer just focused on fixing immediate issues. She was looking ahead, planning for growth, and pushing her team to think bigger. With Carla's guidance, she started to lay the foundation for long-term goals, expanding their client base, streamlining operations even further, and building a reputation as a top-tier department in the company. She also knew that for the department to truly grow, they would need to expand their team. While they had made impressive strides with the current group, Jasmine recognized that the demands of the projects she envisioned would require more hands on deck. The team would need new skills, new energy, and new perspectives. Hiring the right people was going to be crucial. Jasmine's first step was to speak with HR about creating a hiring plan. They needed more specialists in certain areas: project management, data analysis, and client relations. But she didn't just want to fill positions. She wanted to find individuals who would complement the team, people who shared the department's new vision and culture. It wasn't just about skill, it was about mindset. One afternoon, as Jasmine was going over some new job descriptions with Carla, she received a call from Sarah. Her voice on the other end was excited, but there was an undercurrent of concern. "Jasmine, I need to talk to you about something," Sarah said quickly. "It's about the new client pitch we're working on. I think we might be in trouble with the timeline. We're not going to hit the deadline unless we get more support." Jasmine felt a wave of frustration, but she knew that staying calm was the best approach. "Okay, let's go over it together. What's holding us up?" Sarah explained that while the creative team had been working hard, they were running into roadblocks with some of the deliverables. The proposal had grown in scope, and now, with the limited resources they had, it was becoming clear that they wouldn't make the deadline without some extra help. Jasmine knew she had to act quickly. The last thing she wanted was for the team to burn out, especially after the progress they'd made. "I'll talk to Carla and see what we can do. We may need to bring in a temporary consultant or expedite some additional support from another department. Don't worry, we'll figure it out." As she hung up the phone, Jasmine felt the familiar pressure of being in charge, the constant balancing act of meeting deadlines, managing resources, and keeping the team motivated. But she was getting better at it. The stress wasn't gone, but she was learning to handle it more effectively. She knew that this was part of leadership, making quick decisions, adjusting plans when necessary, and keeping her team focused on the bigger picture. She immediately called Carla, explaining the situation and brainstorming possible solutions. After a few minutes, they came up with a plan to temporarily reallocate some resources from another department to help with the project. It wasn't ideal, but it would get the team back on track without overwhelming anyone. Jasmine called Sarah back with the good news. "We've got it covered. We'll bring in some extra support and we'll make sure we meet the deadline. You and your team keep focusing on what you're best at, and I'll handle the rest." Sarah sighed in relief. "Thanks, Jasmine. I knew you'd come through for us." That evening, as Jasmine sat at her desk reviewing the plan, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The project had been a challenge, but it wasn't a crisis. And that was a sign of how far the team had come. They were problem-solving together, staying calm under pressure, and working toward the same goal. Jasmine knew that their ability to handle challenges like this, without panic or frustration, was what would set them apart in the long run. Over the next few days, Jasmine focused on implementing the support system they had devised. She was in constant communication with Sarah, checking in on the progress of the project and making sure everything was running smoothly. The extra help from the other department made a difference, and soon, the timeline was back on track. But as Jasmine managed the immediate crisis, she also continued to keep her eye on the bigger picture. The hiring plan was moving forward, and she had already begun interviews for a few key positions. She was particularly excited about the prospects of expanding the client relations team. They needed someone who could build relationships with high-level clients and open doors to new business opportunities. At the same time, she was working on a department-wide training program aimed at improving the skills of everyone on the team. She wasn't just looking to bring in new talent. She also wanted to nurture the people already in the department. She was determined that no one would be left behind in the transition to a more ambitious, future-focused team. In her free time, Jasmine reflected on how much had changed. It felt like just yesterday she had been sitting in that office, fired by Mr. Thompson, unsure of what her next steps would be. Now she was leading a department that was growing, evolving, and positioning itself for success. It hadn't been easy, and there were still many challenges ahead. But Jasmine couldn't help but feel proud of what she had accomplished so far. She knew that there would always be setbacks. No leader was immune to problems. But Jasmine was confident in one thing. She was learning, she was growing, and most importantly, she was building something lasting. And that was what kept her moving forward. As the days went by, Jasmine felt more certain that the future of the department was in good hands. Not just hers, but the hands of every team member who had stepped up and committed to the vision she had laid out. Together, they were creating something bigger than any one person could have done alone. And that, Jasmine realized, was the true power of leadership. Months passed and the department continued to evolve. Jasmine had spent the better part of the year building something she was incredibly proud of. A team that was not just functional, but thriving. There were still moments of uncertainty, still challenges to face, but Jasmine had learned to navigate them with confidence. What once felt like an impossible task had now become a success story, not just for her, but for the entire team. One of the most rewarding moments came when Jasmine walked into her office one afternoon to find an email titled Team Recognition from the company's senior leadership. The email outlined the department's achievements over the past few months, exceeding client expectations, improving project turnaround times, and significantly increasing new business. But the part that struck her most wasn't the numbers or the accolades. It was the final line. This department is a model for collaboration, resilience, and growth, and we're excited to see where it goes next. Jasmine sat back in her chair, reading the email again. It felt surreal, in the best possible way. This was the recognition she had hoped for, the validation that the changes had worked. But even more than that, it was proof that the department's transformation wasn't just about her leadership. It was about the collective effort of everyone involved. The team had bought into the vision, and together, they had built something remarkable. That evening, after another full day of meetings, Jasmine called a team gathering in the conference room. She could tell that the energy in the room had shifted even more in the past few weeks. There was a new sense of confidence, a belief that they could take on anything. The proposal they had been working on for the last month was one of the most important the department had ever done, and they had nailed it. When everyone had settled into their seats, Jasmine stood at the front, smiling at the familiar faces around her. The team had come a long way, and she could feel the pride in their eyes. "I wanted to gather you all today to share some exciting news," Jasmine began. "The leadership team just sent out an email recognizing our department for all the hard work we've put in over the last few months. We've exceeded our goals in a lot of areas, and we're setting a new standard for what this company can do. I want you all to know that this is your achievement. Without each of you, none of this would have been possible." The team exchanged looks of surprise and pride, and there were a few quiet murmurs of disbelief. Jasmine could see the genuine pride in their faces. They hadn't just met expectations, they had exceeded them. She continued, "When I first came into this role, I knew we had the potential to do something great, but I also knew it wasn't going to be easy. There were challenges. There were moments when we weren't sure how we were going to get through it, but we did. We pulled together, and we built something that's not just good, it's something that sets us apart. I'm proud of all of you." The room was silent for a moment, but then Sarah, who had been one of the most vocal members of the team, stood up. "Jasmine, you've led us through this. You helped us see what we could do if we just worked together. Honestly, I don't think any of us saw how far we could go until you got us on the right track. You've made us believe in this team." Jasmine felt a lump in her throat as she looked around the room. "Thank you, Sarah. But this isn't just me. It's all of us. I've just helped guide the ship, but each of you is a part of why we've made it this far. And we're just getting started." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time Jasmine allowed herself to feel the full weight of what they had accomplished. It wasn't about the accolades or the recognition. It was about the growth she had witnessed, not just in the department's performance, but in each of the individuals on the team. They had come together, worked through their differences, learned to trust one another, and built something lasting. As the applause died down, Jasmine felt a sense of calm wash over her. There would always be more to do, always new goals to reach, but for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace with where they were. The journey had been challenging, and there were more hurdles ahead, but she knew now that they had the foundation to handle anything. Jasmine looked out at her team, and smiled. They weren't just employees anymore. They were a unit, a group of individuals who had come together to create something bigger than any of them could have done alone. And for the first time since she'd been handed that unexpected promotion, Jasmine was certain of one thing. This was exactly where she was meant to be. The department had transformed, and so had she. And as the team laughed and talked excitedly about their next steps, Jasmine knew one thing for sure. The best was yet to come. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. See you in the next video.